My phone slipped from my trembling fingers, crashing onto the kitchen floor. The screen remained lit, displaying an image that shattered my world. There was my daughter, Sophia, radiant in a wedding dress, standing beside a man I barely recognized. "Sophia, did you get married?" My voice cracked as I picked up the phone. "Yes, Mom." "Yesterday." Her tone was flat, distanced by more than just the phone connection. In the background, I heard traffic, distant voices, life moving forward without me. "Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I there?" "It was intimate, Mum. Just immediate family." That word struck like lightning. Family. I stared at her frozen smile and understood with painful clarity. I had become irrelevant, a footnote in her new chapter. Before we continue with this powerful story, if you're new here, welcome to our channel where we share real-life stories that touch the heart. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our emotional journeys. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's see how one mother's life changed forever. My name is Verity Lorelei Blackwood, and for 69 years, I believed family meant everything. I raised Celestine alone after my husband Barnaby died, working tirelessly as a housekeeper for the Thornbury and Wainwright families in Richmond. I scraped together every penny for her education, dreaming of the day I'd stand beside her at her wedding, watching her fulfill every dream. But last Monday morning, sipping coffee in my modest kitchen, I discovered the truth through a Facebook post. Celestine stood in an elegant white gown beside her husband, Dashiell Kincaid. His parents, Montgomery and Vivian Kincaid, smiled proudly as the only witnesses. The caption read, "Our perfect day, surrounded by family. Family, without me. No invitation, no phone call, no explanation." I learned about my only daughter's wedding the same way strangers learn news, scrolling through social media. The pain exceeded even the grief I felt when Barnaby passed. Sitting in my small Richmond kitchen, mug shaking in my hand, I realized I might have ceased to exist as a mother in Celestine's eyes, reduced to an inconvenient reminder of a past she wanted to forget. I called 3 times that day. Each call went straight to voicemail. Finally, late afternoon, a text arrived. "I'm fine, Mum. We'll talk later." Later. As if her wedding was a minor detail that could wait. That night, staring at the ceiling, I understood I had spent my entire life being a mother to someone who no longer needed me. And in that pre-dawn silence, a different Verity began to awaken. Memories flooded back like a dam breaking. When Celestine was 7 and caught pneumonia, I worked double shifts, cleaning the Thornbury mansion in Windsor Farms during the day, sewing for the Wainwright family in Carytown at night. For 2 weeks, I survived on 3 hours of sleep, nursing her back to health, buying expensive medications I could barely afford. When she recovered, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Mommy, when I grow up and get married, you're going to be the prettiest person there." Those words had lived in my heart for over 20 years. What happened to that promise? I remembered her sweet 16 party. I had saved for 18 months to give her a celebration she'd never forget. I sold jewelry from my marriage to Barnaby. I worked extra weekend shifts. I denied myself basic necessities. We rented the Belle Vista Hall downtown. I bought her the most beautiful dress I could find. I hired a DJ and prepared all the soul food myself. Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, peach cobbler. That night, Celestine hugged me in front of all her friends and announced, "My mama is the best mother in the entire world. I'll remember everything she's done for me forever." Forever apparently lasted until she met Dashiell Kincaid. I thought about the daily sacrifices, rising at 5 every morning to make her breakfast before school, helping her with homework despite never finishing high school myself, staying awake until midnight when she went out with friends, worrying about her safety. The Sundays I brought food to Aunt Sophia's house so Celestine could spend time with her father's family. When she went to college to study business administration, I increased my hours. I cleaned the Thornbury mansion Monday through Friday and worked catering events on weekends. I wanted her to focus solely on her education without financial stress. Every time my knees ached after hours on tile floors, or my hands cracked from harsh chemicals, I thought about the bright future Celestine would have. During those college years, she began changing. She stopped coming home directly after classes. She had study groups, projects, extracurricular activities. Weekends were spent with friends at places foreign to me. When I asked about her day, the answers grew shorter, more distant. "It was fine, Mama. I'll tell you later." But later never came. It was during her senior year that she met Dashiell Kincaid. The first time she mentioned him, her eyes sparkled with something I hadn't seen before. She talked about him constantly, how intelligent he was, how his family had money and connections, how he had ambitious plans. I was happy for her happiness, but I also felt something darker, a premonition that Dashiell represented a world where there was no space for a mother who cleaned other people's homes. The first time Dashiell came for dinner, I cooked a feast: baked mac and cheese, fried chicken, candied yams, cornbread, sweet tea. I wanted to impress him. Dashiell was polite, but his eyes scanned our small home with an expression I couldn't quite read. Celestine seemed nervous, constantly explaining things as if apologizing for our modest lifestyle. "Your home is very nice, Mrs. Blackwood," Dashiell said when leaving. But something in his tone suggested he meant the opposite. That night, Celestine told me I'd been too intense with my questions about his family and career. "Mama, not everyone shares their entire life story in the first conversation." It was the first time I felt like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. But what Celestine didn't know was that her mother had been storing more than just pain during those years of sacrifice. She had also been storing strength, dignity, and a capacity for decision-making that was about to change everything forever. What would you do if your own child erased you from the most important day of their life? Verity's next decision would shock everyone. The days following my discovery passed in a fog of grief and confusion. Celestine didn't call to explain. She didn't visit. She showed no remorse whatsoever. Instead, she posted honeymoon photos from Turks and Caicos as if nothing had happened, as if I were just another follower admiring her curated life. Each new photo confirmed my irrelevance. I tried keeping busy, attending Wednesday Mass at the Chapel of the Holy Redeemer, having tea with Mrs. Serafina Voltaire, my neighbour of 30 years. But the pain remained constant, a dull ache in my chest that made breathing difficult. While sorting through old papers in the wooden trunk that belonged to my mother, the memories returned with crushing force. Birth certificates, immunization records I'd maintained meticulously, report cards where Celestine earned straight A's. I remembered every sacrifice that made those achievements possible. The mornings I sewed dresses for neighborhood ladies to pay for Celestine's piano lessons. The times I ate nothing but toast so she could have meat on her plate. The birthday gifts I saved for all year to afford. I recalled the times she came home crying because her classmates had designer clothes. The next day, I'd go to the market and buy exactly what she wanted, even if it meant delaying the rent payment. Through all those years, Celestine always had excuses for not fully including me in her life. First, it was her studies, then her career, then Dashiell, who didn't do well with overbearing mothers-in-law. I always accepted, I always understood. I always adapted to her schedule, her priorities, her decisions. But looking back now, I realized I had been shrinking in her life, occupying smaller and smaller spaces until I reached the point of not even knowing she was getting married. The Celestine I raised had become a stranger who offered me crumbs of attention only when convenient for her. That Thursday afternoon, while organizing family photos, I found one that made me sob uncontrollably. It was from Celestine's first communion. She was 7 years old, wearing a beautiful white dress I'd commissioned from a local seamstress. In the photo, Celestine hugged me tightly, smiling with pure, innocent joy. I remembered that day perfectly. I had saved for 8 months for that celebration. I rented a hall. I invited the entire family. I prepared barbecue, potato salad, sweet tea, and a massive red velvet cake. Celestine felt like a princess, running from table to table, introducing me as my mama, the most beautiful woman in the world. That night, helping me clean up, she said, "Mama, when I grow up and have my own parties, you're always going to be the most important person." Always. Tears streamed down my face as I held that photograph. What happened to that little girl who promised I'd always be most important? When did I become so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to attend her wedding? I continued looking through photos and found another that hurt just as much. Celestine at 15 during her sweet 16 party. I had worked double shifts for an entire year to give her that celebration. I cleaned houses by day, babysat children at night, sold sweet potato pies at the farmer's market on weekends, all to see her happy. In the photo, we were dancing together during a special song. She had requested a song I used to sing to her when she was sick. "Mama, you always made me feel better with this song. I want us to dance to it so everyone knows how much I love you." Those words echoed in my mind like ghosts. How had I gone from being her comfort to being her embarrassment? I found a letter Celestine wrote me at 18, just before starting college. Pink paper with careful handwriting and little hearts drawn in the margins. "Dearest Mama, tomorrow I start a new chapter. But I want you to know that nothing I achieve will be possible without everything you've done for me. You are my hero, my role model, the bravest woman I know. When I grow up, I want to be a mother like you, loving, sacrificial, always putting family first. I love you with all my heart, and you will always be the most important person in my life. Your loving daughter, Celestine." I read that letter 3 times before I could believe it. This was the same person who had just excluded me from the most important day of her life. The same person who promised I'd always be most important. I sat on my bed, with the letter trembling in my hands, and cried harder than I'd cried since burying Barnaby. I cried for the girl who wrote those words and the woman she became. I cried for all the dreams I had about being mother of the bride. I cried for the relationship I thought we had, which apparently existed only in my imagination. After the tears came rage, a rage I'd never felt in my 69 years. How dare she treat me like this after everything I'd done? How could she be so cruel, so ungrateful? I had sacrificed my youth, my social life, my own dreams, all for her. And this was how she repaid me? With humiliation, exclusion, oblivion? But after the rage came something worse. Shame. I started questioning if somehow it was my fault. Had I been too clingy, too unsophisticated for Celestine's new, refined life? I remembered the faces of Montgomery and Vivian Kincaid when they met me. That subtle expression I couldn't interpret then but understood now, pity mixed with discomfort. To them, I was the embarrassing mother-in-law to be tolerated, not accepted. I got up and looked at myself in the mirror. There was Verity Lorelei Blackwood, 69 years old, grey hair, hands roughened from decades of work, wrinkles that spoke of years of worry. I wasn't elegant, like Vivian Kincaid. I hadn't travelled the world. I didn't speak multiple languages. I didn't know about fine wines or theatre. I was a simple woman who had done the best she could with what she had. But did that make me less valuable? Did that justify my own daughter treating me like I didn't exist? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Celestine could live without including me in important moments, then I could learn to live without waiting for her scraps of attention. What Verity decided next would shock her daughter to the core. But was it too late for reconciliation? Or was this just the beginning of something even more painful? Friday morning, I called my sister, Aunt Sophia, who lives in Charleston, South Carolina. I needed to talk to someone, to vent, to ask for advice. Aunt Sophia had always been the most direct of my siblings, the one who told the truth without sugarcoating. "She got married without telling you?" Aunt Sophia shouted when I explained what happened. "That girl has lost her mind. How can a daughter do that to her mother?" I told her everything, from the first changes in Celestine's attitude to discovering the wedding on Facebook. Aunt Sophia listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. "Verity?" she finally said in a serious voice. "I always told you that you gave too much to that girl. You spoiled her since she was little. You put her on a pedestal, and now you're seeing the consequences. Children need boundaries. They need to understand that respect must be earned and maintained." Her words stung because they contained truth. I had always indulged Celestine. I had always given in to her tantrums. I had always prioritized her needs above mine. But I had done it out of love, because I wanted her to have everything I couldn't have. "So what am I supposed to do now?" I asked, sobbing. "Now you're going to do what you should have done years ago," Aunt Sophia replied firmly. "You're going to live for yourself. Celestine has already made her decision about what place you occupy in her life. Now it's your turn to decide what place she occupies in yours." After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen for hours thinking about her words. She was right. Celestine had clearly demonstrated where I stood in her new life. Nowhere. It was time for me to make a decision about where she would stand in my new life. Saturday morning, as I drank my coffee, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when I answered, I heard Celestine's voice. "Mama, how are you?" she asked cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. "Guess what? We're back from our honeymoon. Turks and Caicos was amazing. Dashiell and I want to stop by this afternoon to tell you everything." Tell me everything? After 2 weeks of silence, after excluding me from her wedding, now she wanted to chat about her vacation as if I were a casual friend. "What time are you planning to come?" I asked. "Around 5. We'll bring pictures and some gifts we bought for you." Gifts from Turks and Caicos couldn't compensate for the greatest humiliation of my life. "All right," I said. "I'll be here." I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, making sweet tea, buying fresh pastries from the local bakery. It was what I always did when Celestine visited, making everything perfect to receive her. But this time, as I mopped and dusted, I wondered why I was still trying so hard for someone who clearly didn't value my efforts. At 5 sharp, Celestine and Dashiell arrived. Celestine looked radiant, tanned from the Caribbean sun, wearing expensive new clothes. Dashiell wore his usual courteous but distant smile. "Mama!" Celestine cried, hugging me like we were best friends. "I missed you so much. Look how tanned I got." I hugged her back, inhaling her expensive perfume, not the same one she used when she lived with me. Everything about her was different now. Sit down, I said. I served them sweet tea and offered pastries. Tell me everything. How was the wedding? Celestine exchanged a quick glance with Dashiell before answering. It was beautiful, Mama. Very simple, just like we wanted. Nothing too elaborate. And where was it? I asked, though my heart was already sinking. A beautiful little chapel in Ashland. Very intimate, very private. Just us and Dashiell's parents as witnesses. Just them and Dashiell's parents. As if I didn't exist. As if 23 years of raising her gave me no right to be there. And why didn't you tell me anything? I finally asked, my voice trembling. Celestine sighed and made the face she used as a child when caught doing something wrong. Mama, it all happened so fast. You know how these bureaucratic things are. Suddenly the date came up, and we decided not to complicate things. Besides, I never liked big parties anyway. It was a lie. Celestine had always loved big parties. Her sweet 16, her graduation. All our celebrations had been with many guests and lots of joy. But now, for her wedding, she claimed she wanted something intimate that didn't include me. But Mama, Celestine continued in a syrupy voice, that's why we came today, to celebrate with you. Look at all the gifts we brought. She pulled out a bag of typical tourist souvenirs, a ceramic ashtray, some seashells, a t-shirt that read, I love Turks and Caicos, some coconut candies. Gifts they probably grabbed at the airport, thinking, oh, we should bring something for Celestine's mom. Thank you, baby, I said, feeling like each gift was a slap disguised as kindness. We spent 2 hours talking about the honeymoon, the places they visited, the fancy restaurants, the activities they did. It was like watching vacation photos of strangers. I nodded, smiled, asked appropriate questions, but inside I felt something breaking permanently. When they left with vague promises to see each other soon and an invitation to visit their new apartment, sometime, I was left alone in my living room, surrounded by cheap souvenirs, feeling the weight of the silence they left behind. That night, as I stored the gifts in a drawer where I knew I'd never look again, I made a decision that would change everything. If Celestine could live without including me in important moments, then I could learn to live without waiting for her scraps of attention. Sunday dawned with clear skies that contrasted completely with the storm inside me. I woke at 5, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that heaviness in my chest. In its place was something different, a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. I made strong black coffee and sat at the kitchen table where I had waited for so many calls from Celestine that never came. But this morning, that table represented something new, the place where Verity Lorelei Blackwood would make the most important decision of her life. I took out an old notebook and wrote on the first page, Plan for Independence. Verity Lorelei Blackwood. What was Verity planning? And how would Celestine react when she discovered her mother was about to disappear from her life completely? The first thing I wrote was, assess resources. During all those years of sacrifice, I had managed to save a considerable amount. I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't helpless either. I had savings from a lifetime of work, a small but fully owned house in an area that had become valuable, and something Celestine never knew about, a secret bank account. I had opened that account when Celestine turned 18, thinking it would be my wedding gift to her. For 10 years, I deposited every extra dollar I earned sewing dresses for. Neighborhood ladies. I had imagined the moment I'd give it to her. My daughter, this is so you can start your marriage without debt. But now, after being excluded from her wedding, that money would take a completely different path. The second point on my list was research housing options. I couldn't stay in this house where every corner reminded me of years spent waiting. I needed a new place, a space that was completely mine. I remembered Mrs. Serafina Voltaire had always told me about her sister who moved to a residential community for older adults in Ashland. It's wonderful, Verity. There are activities, security, people our age. My sister says she's never felt so free in her life. At the time, I thought those places were for people who didn't have family. Now I understood they were for people who had decided to care for themselves. The third point was the most painful, but most necessary. Gradually cut ties. I couldn't just disappear overnight. That would cause unnecessary drama and give Celestine reasons to justify her behavior. My mum was always so dramatic. That's why we didn't include her in important things. No, my exit had to be as silent and dignified as my erasure from her life had been. After breakfast, I showered and put on my Sunday navy dress. But this morning, I wasn't going to church. I was going to begin the most important investigation of my life. My first stop was the bank. Mr. Thaddeus Pemberton, the executive who had managed my accounts for 10 years, was surprised to see me near the branch on a Sunday morning. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood," he greeted me. "Is everything all right?" "Perfect, Mr. Pemberton," I replied with a smile that surprised even me. "I'm just reviewing my financial options. I might need to make some moves this week." "Of course, ma'am. I'm available Monday if you'd like to review your accounts in detail." That small conversation gave me more energy than I expected. For the first time in years, someone spoke to me like a person capable of making important financial decisions, not like an old lady who needed others to manage her money. From there, I went directly to Ashland, to the residential community Mrs. Voltaire had mentioned, the Solstice Gardens. As soon as I arrived, I could see why people loved it. It was beautiful and clean, with well-maintained gardens and an atmosphere of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist, a kind woman named Marigold, welcomed me with a genuine smile. "I'm glad you came," she said enthusiastically. "We happen to have 2 very nice apartments available. Would you like a tour?" For the next 2 hours, Marigold showed me every corner of the Solstice Gardens. The apartments were small but comfortable, perfect for one person. They had a living dining area, 1 bedroom, a full bathroom, and an equipped kitchenette. What I loved most was the balcony overlooking the gardens. "We have lots of activities," Marigold explained. "Mondays are yoga, Tuesdays are knitting and crafts, Wednesdays are mass in the chapel, Thursdays are ballroom dancing, Fridays are movie nights. On weekends, we organize excursions to Savannah, Charleston, the Blue Ridge Mountains." Every activity she mentioned sounded like something I might enjoy, things I had never done because I was always waiting for Celestine's availability. "Are the people who live here happy?" I asked. "Look, Mrs. Blackwood," Marigold told me honestly, "most of our residents come here after complicated family situations. Some have lost their partners. Others have children who live far away. Others simply decided they wanted more independence. At first, many arrive sad, nostalgic. But after a few months, they seem like different people. Happier, more active, more alive. More alive. How long had it been since I truly felt alive? "What are the requirements?" I asked. Marigold explained everything. I had to be over 60, check. Have stable income to cover the monthly fee, I had savings for several years. And pass a basic medical evaluation. My health was excellent. "How long does the admission process take?" I asked. "If you bring all the documents this week, we could have everything ready in 2 weeks." I looked again toward the balcony of the apartment facing the gardens. In that moment, I made a decision with surprising clarity. "I'll take the one with the balcony," I said without hesitation. I returned home that afternoon with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years: genuine hope. Not hope that Celestine would change, but hope for a new life that depended solely on my own decisions. Monday morning, I went to the bank at 9 sharp. Mr. Pemberton greeted me professionally, but when I explained I needed to make major moves in my accounts, I noticed new respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm delighted to hear you're making proactive financial decisions," he said, reviewing my statements. "You've been very disciplined with your savings. You have very solid resources." Hearing those words filled me with confidence I didn't know I had. For so many years, I had lived thinking I was a person of limited resources. But the reality was that I had worked hard, saved diligently, and built a solid financial foundation. From there, I went to Mr. Quincy Ashford, a lawyer Mrs. Voltaire had recommended. I needed to update my will. "Mrs. Blackwood, what brings you here?" Mr. Ashford asked. "I need to update my will and organize my assets," I told him directly. For 40 minutes, we reviewed all my property documents, bank accounts, and insurance policies. It was impressive to see it all together. I really had built a considerable estate through pure work and discipline. "Do you have any specific changes in mind for the will?" he asked. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I want to leave 50% of my assets to charitable institutions that help working single mothers. The other 50% goes to my daughter, but with one condition: she can only access the inheritance after writing a letter explaining why she made certain decisions about our relationship. She doesn't have to apologize. She just has to be honest about her reasons." Mr. Ashford wrote everything down carefully. "That's a very thoughtful condition, Mrs. Blackwood." "I'm not looking for revenge, Mr. Ashford. I'm looking for her to understand that actions have consequences." When I left his office, I felt like a completely different person. I had taken total control of my life. Verity's transformation was complete, but when Celestine discovered what her mother had done, would she finally understand what she had lost? Or was it already too late? The following days passed in a flurry of activity. I hired movers to assess my belongings. I decided to keep only the essentials: clothes, small furniture, important photos, objects with real sentimental value. Everything else would be donated or sold. The hardest part was deciding what to do with Celestine's things I still kept in her old room: school trophies, books, clothes she left when she moved out. I finally packed everything in labeled boxes and rented a storage unit near her apartment. If she ever wanted them, she could pick them up. During that week, Celestine called me twice. The conversations were courteous but distant on both sides. She talked about her new job, decorating plans, dinners with the Kincaids. I listened politely, but shared nothing about my own plans. For the first time in years, I had important secrets that didn't include my daughter. "Is everything okay, Mama?" she asked on the second call. "You sound different." "Everything is perfect, baby," I replied with complete honesty. "I'm just organizing some things." "Do you need help with anything?" The question would have thrilled me before. Now it simply confirmed that Celestine still saw me as someone who needed help, not someone capable of solving her own problems. "No thank you, baby. Everything is under control." On Friday, I got the call from Marigold at the Solstice Gardens. My application was approved, and I could move in the following Monday. That night, alone in my house surrounded by packed boxes and covered furniture, I didn't feel sadness or nostalgia. I felt excitement about starting something new. Saturday morning, my phone rang. It was Celestine. Mama, Dashiell and I want to invite you to dinner tomorrow. We're going to show you our new apartment. It was the invitation I had waited months for, but it was too late. Oh, baby, that's unfortunate, I replied serenely. I already have plans for tomorrow. Plans? With who? With some new friends. We're going on a day trip to Lake Gaston. It wasn't a lie. The residents of the Solstice Gardens had a trip scheduled, and I had already signed up. But Mama, we can change it to another day. It's important to us that you see our home. Thank you, baby. But I'm already committed. Maybe another time when I have more availability. There was a long silence. Celestine wasn't used to me having plans that didn't revolve around waiting for her. Well, okay. We'll organize something later. Sure, baby. Have a wonderful dinner. When I hung up, I stayed seated in that familiar kitchen, smiling with deep satisfaction. For the first time in my life, Celestine had to adjust to my schedule instead of me adjusting to hers. Early Monday, as movers loaded my belongings, I looked one last time at every room. In Celestine's bedroom, now completely empty, I whispered a silent farewell. Thank you for teaching me that true love sometimes means knowing when to walk away. My first week at the Solstice Gardens passed like a beautiful dream. Every morning I woke in my cozy apartment, made coffee in my kitchenette, and went out to the balcony to look at the gardens where I had already identified my new neighbours. There was Mrs. Octavia, 72, who had been a teacher for 40 years. There was Mr. Benedict Harlow, 75, a widower who had been a carpenter, and now made small furniture as gifts for friends. It was strange to feel part of a group where I was valued for who I was, not for what I could do for others. At community meals, my new friends asked about my life, my opinions, my plans. No one saw me as somebody's mother. I was simply Verity, a woman with her own stories, dreams, and personality. Wednesday evening, as I ate dinner in my apartment, my phone rang. It was Celestine. "Mama, where are you?" she asked, her voice frantic. "I went to the house and it's completely empty. The neighbours said you moved out. What's going on?" Her voice had a mix of confusion and panic I hadn't heard since she was little. "I'm doing very well, baby," I replied serenely. I moved to a place more suitable for my age. More suitable? What does that mean? Why didn't you tell me anything? Because they were personal decisions that didn't require your approval, I said firmly, but without aggression. Long silence. Celestine wasn't used to me making important decisions without consulting her, even though she'd been making hers for years without consulting me. "Where are you living now?" "In a place where I'm happy, baby." That's what matters. "Mama, you're scaring me. This isn't normal for you. Are you mad at me about something?" The question would have disarmed me before. Now I saw it for what it really was. An attempt to return to the old dynamic where I was responsible for managing her emotions. "I'm not mad, Celestine. I'm living my life." What does that mean? It means I finally understood that I have the right to make my own decisions, to have my own plans, to be happy without depending on others' approval. "Can you tell me where you are?" Dashiell and I are worried. Dashiell and I, always a unit making joint decisions about my life. "I'm at the Solstice Gardens in Ashland," I finally told her. "It's a residential community for people my age." "A retirement home?" The words came out with obvious disdain. "No, baby. It's a place where I live independently with the company of people at the same life stage as me. I have my own apartment, my own activities, my own social life." Social life? There was genuine surprise in her voice. as if she'd never considered I could have a life independent of her. Yes, Celestine, I have new friends, activities I enjoy, plans that don't include waiting for you to have time for me. Mama, we've always had time for you. Did you really have time to include me in your wedding? The silence that followed was long and heavy. It was the first time I had directly mentioned the wedding exclusion. Mama, I already explained that it all happened so fast. Celestine, I interrupted firmly but calmly. I'm not interested in hearing more excuses. What happened, happened. I'm not looking for apologies. I just want you to understand that decisions have consequences. What kind of consequences? The consequence that I finally understood I'm not a priority in your life, and I've decided you won't be a priority in mine either. The words came out with a clarity that surprised me. There was no anger, no resentment, only quiet honesty that made me feel freer than I'd felt in years. Does that mean you don't want to be my mother anymore? The question hurt, because I could hear the little girl behind the adult woman. I will always be your mother, baby. But I will no longer be the mother who waits for crumbs of your attention. I will no longer be the mother who accepts any treatment just to be present in your life. If you want a relationship with me, it will have to be a relationship of mutual respect. And what would that look like? It was the first time Celestine specifically asked what I wanted from our relationship, instead of simply assuming I would adapt to whatever she offered. I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but I know it can't be like before. After hanging up that night, I sat on my balcony watching the lights of Ashland, feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. It had been the hardest conversation of my life, but also the most necessary. For the first time, I had set clear boundaries with my daughter. The following days passed without news from Celestine, and for the first time, her silence didn't cause me anxiety. I was too busy discovering my new life. On Friday, I participated in the weekly excursion to downtown Richmond. On Saturday, I went to yoga class for the first time in my life. On Sunday, after Mass at the Solstice Gardens Chapel, I was returning to my apartment when Marigold stopped me. Mrs. Blackwood, you have visitors, she said with a smile. A young couple who say they're family. I found them in the visitors' lounge. Celestine looked nervous, almost fragile. Dashiell looked uncomfortable, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Mama? Celestine said, standing when she saw me. Thank you for seeing us. It was strange that she thanked me, as if she finally understood she could no longer simply appear in my life uninvited. Have a seat, I said, taking the chair across from them. How are you? We're fine, Celestine replied, though her voice suggested otherwise. We wanted to see where you're living, to make sure you're comfortable. I looked around the elegant lounge with its beautiful furniture and large windows. Then I looked at them, this young couple who had come to make sure I was comfortable, as if they had any right to approve my decisions. As you can see, I'm very comfortable, I said, with a genuine smile. This place is perfect for me. Yes, it looks very nice, Dashiell admitted. It must be expensive, though. There it was, the real concern. Not my happiness or comfort, but how much of their inheritance I was spending. Fortunately, I can pay for it without problems, I replied calmly. It turns out I worked and saved more than you knew. I watched as Celestine and Dashiell exchanged a quick glance, obviously having discussed my financial situation before coming. Mama, we don't want you to run out of money living in a place like this, Celestine said. Why would I run out of money? I asked with genuine curiosity. Well, you always told us money was tight. It was tight because I constantly prioritized your needs over mine. Now that it's clear you don't need my help, I can use my money for my own happiness." "What do you mean we don't need your help?" Dashiell asked tensely. "I mean, you are successful, independent adults, capable of making your own decisions without consulting me, including decisions as important as getting married. If you're independent enough for that, then you don't need me saving money for your emergencies." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. I could see them processing the logic of my words, realizing they couldn't have both: total independence from me when it suited them, and access to my resources when they needed them. "Mama," Celestine said finally, her voice softer, "are you very angry with me?" It was the question of a child, not an adult. For the first time since the wedding, I felt a little compassion for her. "I'm not angry, baby," I told her honestly. "I'm disappointed. I'm sad. But above all, I'm at peace." At peace? At peace with finally understanding who I am beyond being your mother. At peace with having discovered that I can be happy without depending on your approval or attention. Celestine remained silent, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Does that mean you don't love me anymore?" "I love you more than you can imagine, Celestine. But I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to disrespect you. I've learned that true love includes boundaries, includes dignity, includes mutual respect." "And what can we do to fix this?" Dashiell asked. I looked at both of them, this young couple, hoping that with a visit and a few apologies, everything would return to normal. "There's nothing to fix," I said calmly. "I'm not broken. I'm not sick. I'm not acting out of spite. I'm simply living the life I deserve to live." "But can we still be family?" Celestine asked, her voice trembling. "We will always be family," I assured her, "but it will be a different kind of family. One where we respect each other, where we include each other in important things, where we treat each other as equal adults." "How do we know what you expect from us?" Dashiell asked practically. "Celestine knows how to treat me with respect," I replied, looking directly at my daughter. "She did it for many years when she was younger. She just needs to remember how." Celestine nodded slowly, finally understanding there was no quick fix, that she would have to do real work to rebuild our relationship. "Can we call you sometimes?" she asked in a small voice. "Of course," I said, "but I won't be available every time you call. I have my own life now, my own activities, my own commitments." When they left that afternoon with vague promises to maintain better communication, I stayed in the visitors' lounge processing what had happened. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tears of remorse, no promises of immediate change. But there had been something more valuable: recognition. For the first time, Celestine had recognized that she'd treated me poorly. Today, 6 months later, I wake every morning in my cozy apartment and look out at a different world. It's not a world without pain, but it's a world where I choose who is part of my story. I tend my plants on the patio. I read books I always wanted to read. I attend the chapel where no one knows me as Celestine's mother. I'm simply Verity Lorelei Blackwood, a 69-year-old woman learning to live for herself after decades of living exclusively for others. Sometimes I get calls from unknown numbers that I know are Celestine trying to reach me. I hear her voice on voicemail, always crying, always apologizing, always promising she'll change. But some exclusions cause pain too deep to be healed just with words. During these months, I've learned that the loneliness I feared doesn't exist when you live in peace with yourself. My days are filled with activities that nourish my soul. Knitting classes with Mrs. Octavia. Thursday, dances with Mr. Benedict. weekend excursions where I discover places I'd never visited. Last week, I received a formal letter from Celestine, typed with no tears to smudge the ink. In it, she explained with surprising coldness her reasons for excluding me from the wedding. She said it had been a practical decision, that the Kincaids insisted on a small ceremony, that she hadn't wanted to hurt my feelings, but hadn't wanted to create conflicts with her new in-laws either. I read that letter 3 times before fully understanding. Celestine had reduced the most painful moment of my life to a practical decision. There was no recognition of the harm she'd caused, no understanding of the sacrifice it had been to raise her alone, no gratitude for years of unconditional love. That letter confirmed something I already knew in my heart. The Celestine I raised had disappeared forever. In her place was a woman who viewed our relationship as a social obligation to be managed efficiently, not as a sacred bond deserving care and respect. I put the letter away in a wooden box along with old photographs. Not out of spite, but because some words only need to be read, not answered. A mother's love doesn't end. It just changes form. My love for Celestine transformed into something different. Respect for my own dignity, care for my own happiness, protection for my own peace. This morning, as I water my plants and watch the sunrise over Ashland, I think of all the women who, like me, have spent their lives waiting to be valued by others. I think of mothers who sacrifice their dreams for children who later see them as embarrassing burdens. I think of grandmothers who help raise grandchildren, then are told they're interfering too much. To all those women, I would say what I now know. It's never too late to choose your own happiness. It's never too late to set boundaries. It's never too late to decide you deserve respect, consideration, and to be treated as the valuable person you've always been. The freedom I feel now wasn't born from punishing Celestine, but from freeing myself. It wasn't born from revenge, but from self-respect. It wasn't born from hatred, but from self-love that had been dormant for too many years. Last night, Mrs. Octavia asked if I ever regretted my decision. "Don't you miss your daughter?" she asked with genuine concern. "I miss the daughter I thought I had," I replied honestly. "But I don't miss the relationship we actually had, because that relationship was slowly killing me. It's the purest truth I've ever spoken. For years, I lived a fantasy where I believed Celestine loved me the way I loved her. The reality was that to Celestine, I was convenient when she needed me and an embarrassment when she didn't. Today, I write these words from my patio with the sound of the garden fountain in the background, with the scent of flowers I planted last month, with the certainty that I chose the right path. I don't know what the future holds, but I know it will be a future where my happiness doesn't depend on others' decisions. Sometimes the greatest love is the silence one chooses to maintain. And in that silence, Verity Lorelei Blackwood finally found her voice, her strength, and her peace. Did you connect with Verity's story? Have you ever had to choose between family and your own dignity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories matter to me. Which city are you watching from? Let me know in the comments so I can see where my audience is from around the world. If this story touched your heart, please consider supporting the channel by clicking the Super Thanks button below. Your support helps me bring more powerful, real-life stories like this one. Every contribution, no matter how small, means the world to me and allows me to continue sharing these important narratives. Thank you so much for watching and for your incredible support. I truly look forward to reading your comments and hearing your own experiences. On the screen right now, you can see 2 more emotional life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more content on the channel exploring themes of family, dignity, and personal growth. If you're new here, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories. We upload new content every week. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to reclaim your dignity. And it's never too late to start living the life you truly deserve. See you in the next story, with love and respect.